Hi, Jonathan. How you doing? Looks like you're the first attendee today. Getting a couple new participants right now, so just want to welcome everyone who is just joining now. Feel free to give a little bit of background about yourself, what brought you here today, and maybe the biggest takeaway that you'd like to get from today's presentation. Feel free to just break the ice, say who you are, where you're from, any other details you'd like to share. We'll get started at the top of the hour over at here, 2 p.m. over here Eastern time. So in about 3 minutes, we will begin the presentation. Welcome to any new participants. We're going to get started in 3 minutes at the top of the hour at 2 p.m. Eastern. In the meantime, feel free to just mention in the chat, why you're here, who you are, where you're from, and what you'd like to get out of today's presentation, or the biggest takeaway you'd like to learn today. Two more minutes. Jonathan, welcome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's the big challenge. Is you nailed it. And that's a. Oops, sorry, I'm reading Jonathan's. Yes. Special ed, trying to learn how to. Yeah, distance learning is challenging. So it looks like very similar questions from both Anne and from Jonathan. It's hard to keep kids motivated. There's going to be a slide on motivation that we'll talk about in detail, but it's I don't think there's any one solution for any one kid. We'll get into that in a minute, but it's this is new for everyone. So experimentation and keeping an open mind, and also being lenient but making sure we're staying on track with our students are all very important things to help balance that motivation and development for our students, which becomes a lot more challenging with distance learning. Thank you guys for getting the discussion going. Appreciate that. One more minute and we will, I'll jump into the presentation. Yeah, okay, and it's 2 o'clock now, so I will go ahead and I will get this presentation going. Oops. Give me 1 second here. Sorry, I added a duplicate slide by accident. All right, here we go. Okay, so navigating distance learning with Nick Prutting. Let me get the chat open here so I can still see whenever you guys are talking in the chat while it's going on. QA, save the QA for the end. So welcome to distance learning, navigating distance learning with myself, Nick Prutting. Thank you guys all for joining. Thank you for everyone who came here early and is participating in the chat. I'm really excited to have everyone here and excited to get into one of the more challenging aspects of education that's been thrown our way today, which is distance learning, remote education, something that we all need to adapt to regardless of how we feel about it. So let's be honest, distance learning is challenging. No matter what age group you are, no matter what level you are, no matter what you're trying to accomplish, whether you're a 3rd grade student trying to just keep up with your homework, or whether you're going after a master's and you're trying to maintain a valuable degree, trying to do so through distance learning. It can be difficult and it's frustrating. You know, that is a reality that we need to accept. So my goal is for you guys here today and for all of my students and my professionals that I work with day to day, one-on-one, my goal is to just make the process less stressful and less frustrating for you. So I like to break the process down. It can seem really intimidating, especially something like distance learning. There's so much for us to do, and there's so much for us to continue from a productivity and development level that it's very intimidating to see the work that is laid out in front of us that we need to do to maintain our development, whether it be for ourselves, for our children, or for our students. And just give me 1 second, sorry. So anyway, sorry about that. So as I was saying, that's my goal, is to take the process and break it down to make it less intimidating, so it's not as frustrating, and then we can find some kind of motivation, because I think that's one of the biggest issues here with distance learning, is not necessarily how hard it is to navigate distance learning itself, but the repercussions and the impact from when students get discouraged because of distance learning, or when they get encouraged to become distracted from things that are not their focus, that are not their schoolwork. So that's a lot of things and we'll address each and every one of those things today. Just a couple of ground rules for the presentation today. Continue to use the chat for any questions that you have for me that are based on the slides or based on what I'm saying at that moment. I will take all the natural pauses during the presentation to address the chat and get to all of the questions and anecdotes that I can. For the Q&A function, I want you guys to save that for if you have a question that you really want answered, your burning question that you most desire to have answered. I want you to save that for the Q&A, and then once I finish the presentation, I'm going to go through the Q&A and I'm going to address all of the questions that you guys filled out in that section. Okay. A little bit of background about myself before we get into the agenda today. First off, it's nice to meet you all. Again, my name is Nick. I am a private tutor and professional consultant. I have been tutoring online professionally for 8 years, and I've been running my own independent practice for the last 3 years. I graduated from St. John's University with a bachelor's degree in English, and that was actually where I got my start as a writing consultant. I worked at the University Writing Center from 2012 through 2014, and that's what got my professional start. The main areas that I focus on are reading, comprehension, and writing. And I have also actually expanded to working with professionals. I work with professionals on their professional business writing and communication as well. Just in terms of what we're talking about today, distance learning, the reason that I started doing these presentations and the reason why I feel so strongly about educating people on the right way to go about it is because about 2 years ago, I exclusively made my practice online. Before any of the pandemic had begun, I had been building this for a few years just because it was something that I would do. I could put that kind of focus into. I could play around with it and I could experiment. So over the last 2-3 years, I've really been able to build and develop different systems. And again, like I said to Jonathan before we started, it's not necessarily a one answer or a blanket solution for any one student. It's really about getting to understand that student, what motivates them and what they're good at and what they struggle with, that we can start to develop plans for them that are tailored for them. And I think that especially goes for distance and remote learning. It can be harder in a group setting, but we'll touch on that a little bit as well. So I also want to encourage you guys to take a look at my profile. I'm going to put it in the chat for you right here. Feel free to go there, ask me any questions that you want. I've had people ask me if I'm going to be sharing the slides after the class, and I do not traditionally do that. But for people who do go to the link and they go to my profile and they ask and they get a conversation going, I can share more information there. So you can ask me questions directly on my page once the session ends. Just go to that profile and ask, and I usually respond within 3 hours. Last but not least, if you do decide to to book a lesson with me and purchase a session, make sure you use the code GET10. It'll give you a 10% off discount throughout the rest of this month. It's the last day, but also for the whole month of July, you'll get 10% off. So be sure to use that if you do find yourself there. Okay, so the agenda today, just give me 1 second. Let me take a sip of water, all this talking. Okay, so our agenda for today, basically just the different pieces of the distance learning puzzle to me. So number one, stay informed in taking information, making sure you're getting the latest information. Making sure you know what's going on. You have to know what's going on first and foremost. You have to have the knowledge, and it comes from a number of different sources that we'll get into. Set the scene is the second part. That talks about physically setting up a space for your student and how important that is in terms of preparation, which is the next part. And they go hand in hand, setting the scene and preparing. What kind of environment are we setting up for our students? Engagement, we talked about that. It goes hand in hand with motivation, which will have a separate slide to itself, but engagement, how do we keep the students engaged now that we're not physically there to make sure that they're doing so? Read the instructions. Yes, there is an entire slide for read the instructions, because as cliche and as annoying as it has gotten for students to have their teachers beat them in the head with that, it's more important now than ever. From what I've been experiencing the last 3 to 4 months, the instructions are at sometimes all the student has when we're distance learning. So that becomes very important. Then we're going to talk about going from responsibility to accountability and how that shifts in distance learning. What becomes new for the student, what becomes new for the teacher, and what we're now able to do and what we're not able to do. Confronting those realities and understanding who's responsible and accountable for what realistically. Motivation we'll get into as well. And thank you for asking the question about motivation before we got started today. I'll actually look at that after I go through the agenda here. But motivation, it's distance learning or not, it's a challenge with students. It's a huge struggle, so we'll definitely talk about that. And then last but not least, self-planning. If there's anything that this crisis has taught us, it's that we need to plan for ourselves. We need to make sure we have a plan for ourselves, because it's too risky to be reliant on other people, institutions, or systems. So we need to make sure that we have a plan in all of these pieces: staying informed, preparing, making sure we know the instructions, and understanding responsibility and engagement, motivation, accountability. They're all going to play a factor into that. So for everyone who just joined, someone asked in the chat today, they mentioned, that they have a hard time forming a connection when there's distance learning, and that's something that we will focus on in motivation. And we'll also talk about it in preparation. I think it's important to make sure students are preparing in the right way that's going to set them up to engage properly with us as instructors and as teachers. What do we do if a student who refuses or are reluctant to put the camera on? I've run into that a number of times. I've had that battle a number of times. We're going to talk about that specifically as well, Wendy. Thank you very much. Thank you guys all for your participation. It's really, ask as many questions as you need. I really like the participation going on. All right, so stay informed. This is the number one step. Just like anyone dealing with this pandemic in any industry or institution, we need to stay informed of what's going on in our schools, in our kids' schools. We have to know what the administration is doing right now, and we have to have some kind of an understanding of what they're going to be doing or what they're going to be able to do, come fall. So first and foremost, know your school's policy on distance learning and remote learning. What the school is doing and know what they're going to do. And that comes from having the right resources and talking to the right people. Remain active, even though we're in a time where we're distant. Remain active in your school communities. Talk to other parents. Talk to the teachers. If they're offering time to speak to students or teachers outside of any group classroom time, take advantage of that. Take advantage of that and speak with them. Ask the administration what they're doing. See if they have a website. Look at their website. See what they're updating. Get ahead of the curve and know what's happening next. Use all of the available resources, which includes your peers, your other fellow parents, the teachers, and your students, excuse me, your kids and their classmates as well. It's all information that's going to be valuable. I'm actually going to share something with you guys right now that I have on my LinkedIn and I've been using just to track what's happening from more of I guess a governmental level and a regional level. And it's here, I just shared it with you guys. It's edweek.org, and it basically just shows what each school district is doing right now and what their governments are planning on doing going forward. So it does help, and it can help to know this information, because there have been instances where schools are creating plans that are not in line with their local government and regions regulations that are being planned. So there's going to be a point where someone is going to have to, someone doesn't see the link. You guys don't see the link? All right, let me see if I can figure this out. Should be going to all panelists. Aha. My apologies, guys. My apologies. You probably didn't see my profile either. I'm gonna put both of them in for you right now. That what I just sent you is edweek.org. That is the message there. Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. And then you guys must not have seen this before, but this is my profile on Take Lessons, and then this is the code for 10% off, just so we're all up to speed. Thank you very much, guys, for letting me know about that. Sorry about that. Okay, back to it. So take a look through edweek.org. I am constantly, scouring online and talking to my colleagues and my peers in education, looking for resources on the most detailed and up-to-date information that we can get. This is a bit more broad, but I have come across some things that I'm reviewing that I'm not quite ready to send out yet. But I am reviewing, and they're pretty substantial in terms of information on a much more detailed level than the EdWeek has. So this is a great start, but always be thinking about where you can find information, the most up-to-date information that's going to be relevant to your school and your kids. Another drink, sorry. Okay. So someone asked a question earlier about, what if a student refuses to use the camera? We're going to get to that at the end of the slide. And, that's something that I would love to chat about. If you want to ask a question on my Take Lessons profile and reach out to me after the session, I would love to have a conversation around that, because I think it is not black and white. Given when you work with special needs. So I think that there's a little bit more nuance there, but I do have some standard rules for that. Just making sure the chat's good. Okay. So set the scene for success, right? We want to create a classroom setting for the student. It's really important that we do that. And we don't always have the resources or the opportunity or the space to do it, but we have to really think about this. Where are they going to be learning? Where are they going to be doing school? Right now, they don't have a school space. They don't have that space anymore. So we need to figure out the space in our home that's most appropriate for them. So, the kitchen is an obvious, terrible spot for someone to learn for obvious reasons, just to use, one end of the spectrum that's extreme. When someone's cooking, or there's pots and pans scraping, or someone's eating cereal and you hear the, scraping of the bowl, dishes being put away, being stacked up, anything like that, any noises like this are a distraction. And that doesn't just go for the kitchen, it goes for any room. Are they going to be in a room with a television? Ask these two questions. Where is it happening? And what is happening in the room during class time? Is there a TV in the room? Is there a video game in the room? Do they have their phone on them? Is that something that we're addressing? When we are engaged in classroom time, is it appropriate to have our phone on? Do we actually need that? Or, should we be taking that hour, 2 hours, whatever it is, to focus on school and set it up? So again, this feeds into engagement. This feeds directly into engagement. So some basic guidelines on, what the physical space should be. Again, if you don't have all the tools and all the resources, I think it's a worthwhile investment to save up and to start amassing those things. We'll get into it in preparation what those exact resources are. But I think it is important to start investing now in things like desk space and you know, supply storage space and things like that to mirror as best we can the classroom setting. So the basic guidelines: you should be sitting upright in a chair. Your computer should be at about shoulder height. You should not be having your phone and be laying down on your bed and be like, oh, okay, or even sitting up and, you know, looking on your phone. You need to be sitting down. You need to have your computer. These things have a major psychological impact on the students' engagement and their participation level, and, you know, just what they comprehend and retain. You know, all of this stuff plays a big factor into it. And now, you know, last but not least, I believe the teacher has to be able to see the student. I believe it was Wendy that asked, yeah, Wendy asked before, you know, what do you do when students refuse or are reluctant to put their cameras on? And I had this early on when the pandemic started. A couple of students of mine, and one of them was on an IEP and had special preparations and things that we needed to do during those sessions. And one of them was, you know, he was shy and embarrassed and didn't want to be seen on camera. And I allowed it to go on for about a month and a half. And at a certain point, I had a long conversation with her mother, and I said, look, we have to talk about the camera issue. You know, it's one thing in a group classroom setting, and maybe that's a little bit easier to address first. I think in a group classroom setting, if you have students that are a little bit embarrassed and they're less willing to participate if they are embarrassed, there are things that we can do. One of the things is, you know, just having them, you know, sort of have the top of their head like that showing on the screen, and then they raise their hand when they want to participate. And that's in a group classroom setting, because you know they're still there. Depending on their participation level and their engagement, you know whether or not they're participating. But when we have a one-on-one setting, it's a little bit more challenging. And to continue on to this story, I spoke with the mother and I said, look, I understand that your son's on an IEP and he has this embarrassment, but I think this is a major roadblock to development, because I can't see what he's doing and I'm operating blind and I can't see his face. I can't even see, you know, we're not there physically anymore. So we can't make sure that they're not online. They're not, you know, playing a game on their computer or on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever. You know, that's first off. You know, secondly, if the screen is blocked, I can't see their face. So I can't, you know, that's critical to engagement and proper communication. I need to be able to look at them. I need to see their facial expression to see if, yeah, I know, I get it, I understand. Or if, like, they're really thinking about it, like, oh, okay, yeah. You know, you can hear those things with tone, but it's very important to be able to see their face. It's important, and you're not going to get the same level of engagement without it, right? It's already challenging enough as it is that we're distance learning in the first place, and that we don't have that physical engagement that allows so many different things to happen. We have to be able to see the students. You know, there's very rare cases where I allow it, and there's very rare cases where I think it's ever helpful. So, you know, I would do best to have, I would work on having those conversations with the parents directly and confronting the issue and saying, you know, what is the problem here? And, you know, what can we do to get around this? Because I think that in and of itself is, you know, it impedes development just in general with education for kids. You know, that confidence level is a major thing that holds them back. And, you know, again, I said that I specialize in writing and reading comprehension, and confidence is like, it's like 40 to 50% of what will be holding students back a lot of the times. They just won't feel bold about their own opinions and what they feel. And a lot of times I found that's directly related with kids that are camera shy, and they don't want to speak up in class. They don't want to participate. So I think it's usually related to a deeper issue, but I've more often than not found that it's just used by students as a barrier to progress or engagement or learning. So I would, you know, do everything you can, exhaust all options to nip it in the bud and say this has to happen. I see we're getting some Q&A questions too. Awesome, good job, guys. I'll look at that at the end. So just a little checkpoint here, since it's 2:20, 2:21. We're gonna go till we have a hard stop at 2:50. So once it is around 2:45, I will start getting into those questions in the Q&A. Okay, so preparation ties directly into setting the scene. It's basically an extension of that. So like I said, where is this classroom taking place? Where is it happening? We need to reduce the number of distractions. We need to, you know, I mentioned the phone, I mentioned TV, there's food and games as well, right? Are there video games there? Is someone eating? You know, what are they doing? Any kind of distractions, we need to eliminate as many of them as we possibly can. You know, this is school time, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we need to distinguish that this is school time. This is time that we're spending on school. We're not spending it on games. We're not spending it eating, video games, TV. Those need to happen before or after. So I talked about this as well. So provide a desk space with the appropriate chair. You might not be able to find a school student desk or a desk, you know, an office desk with storage space might be too expensive. But if you have a flat surface and you have a chair that sits upright, that's good. That's a good start. It's good enough for right now. If the computer can be at shoulder height, like it is for me right now, and they can, you know, lean on a surface, they can, you know, have a notebook present, they can take some notes. You know, this is what you need. Except for this is a no-no. You don't want to have the phone out, but you want to have all the stuff that they need set up beforehand. You want to have that space be as conducive as possible for the student or our children to be able to learn, right? And some of that responsibility, most of that responsibility, I believe falls on us as, you know, whoever's in charge of that child, whoever's physically there present. You have to set up that space to be as conducive as possible to a learning environment. We want to mirror a classroom setting as much as we can. So again, I showed the notebook. Be prepared with materials and notes. Everything needs to be ready for when the class or when the lesson starts. It doesn't, you know, 2 o'clock doesn't come around and, oh, hold on, I got to run and get my, or, oh, I didn't realize I needed my calculator. I got to go ask you got to have all of your materials. If it's math class, if it's a science class, have your calculators, have your textbooks, have your notebooks, have your formulas ready. You know, if it's an English class, have the books ready, have your notes ready, have the syllabus ready, have your materials ready. That's why I encourage to have a desk space that has storage, where you can where you can store all of your supplies and equipment, and you can have it right there. You know, open the desk drawer. But you know, it's not the reality for everyone. I believe it's an investment that's worth making, but it's not the reality for everyone. And again, if that's not, then we have to make sure we're prepared. Get all your materials together 30 minutes before class. You know, I think it's important what the students are doing before class. It's another thing that feeds into engagement that we'll get into, but you know, what are they stepping away from and coming into? Is that allowing them to engage in the classroom? Is that going to help them to learn best? Another thing that we need to think about. And then for preparation, last but not least, be ready to participate. You know, if it's a one-on-one session, those are the sessions that I typically have. You don't really have much of a choice because we can't really do much if you don't come prepared. But in a classroom setting, it's really important now more than ever to be ready to participate and to take initiative in participating too, because this is new for teachers. And you know, one of the ways that they're keeping track with who is doing what is by the kids that are participating. You know, that's the best barometer that they have in a remote classroom setting to know who's developing and who's not, who's keeping up and who's not, who's participating. Shows who's doing the work, it shows who's slacking off, it shows who's preparing and who's not. So make sure that you're ready to participate. You know, be ready to contribute. Be ready with more than one idea. Don't just come with, you know, okay, if they talk about this, I'll know about this. Be ready. Be ready to talk about it and actively engage in the classroom. That's going to be now, and increasingly so going forward, that's going to be what allows students to get ahead, at least in the eyes of their teachers and instructors. Engagements. Another topic that was briefly talked about in the chat before we started here. Engagement is a two-way interaction, and to me, it's the key to development. You know, there needs to be engagement on a number of different levels, and it's not just engagement with the teacher and the student. You know, is yes, the teacher and the student need to engage. I need to engage with my students and the people that I work with and make sure that, we're connecting and I know what they're thinking and I know what they're feeling and I can understand how well they're comprehending something. But they also need to engage with the material and they need to engage with their own process, right? They need to engage with the planning. They need to engage with the entire process of learning and development, right? It requires all those steps. So it's not just, are they engaged with me when they're speaking with me, but are they engaged with their material? Are they engaged with the content that they're reading? Because that's really where it starts. If they're engaging with their material, then I can now engage with them. But if they're not, then it slows down development. It gets a lot more challenging to do that. So live teaching is essential for success, right? If we can't see our students face to face, if we can't be in the same physical space as them, we need live teaching, because without it, in my opinion, development, it almost stops. And this, we'll talk about that with reading the instructions. It's something that I've seen here and there. But yeah, it's essential and we need it. Without that engagement, that students, being able to talk and talk their ideas out and have a teacher hold them responsible for the material in some kind of a group setting, it's going to be a serious blow to engagement and development that's going to take more self-planning and more onus on us to figure out. Fortunately, everyone's developing a live teaching plan at this point. There's for the spring, for last spring semester, it was a little bit disheveled since we were all just thrown into it. But for the fall, schools are getting a little bit more ahead of it. So we are having more live teaching. We're seeing more consistent live teaching, which is a good thing. And you should push for it in your schools and you should push for it at your kids' schools because it's important and it's essential. Excuse me. So activity before class infects engagement during class. I touched on it before, but I want to focus on that now a little bit. What's the student doing before the class? It's so important. It is so important. A student's engagement during a class can be made or broken by what they're doing beforehand. If you're I mentioned eating before. That's one of the things. Someone in the middle of a meal where they just finished eating a couple of minutes ago. That's not how it should be set up. They should have had their meal. They should have eaten. They shouldn't be grabbing their food and, okay, like I'm eating in front of the camera now, I'm eating in class. That should all be done and taken care of. But also, what are we pulling them away from? Are we pulling them away from their favorite TV show or, their favorite video game? Because now there isn't going to be engagement. You pull a fifth grader who loves video games away from his favorite video game before, a 45-minute Zoom class. There's no chance. There's no chance for engagement. So what are we doing in the 30 minutes to an hour before class time? It goes directly into preparation, but that's where preparation directly affects engagement, and we need to understand that. So in a virtual setting, and we'll talk about this in a slide on its own, in a virtual setting, responsibility shifts for the students. In a virtual setting, responsibility for engagement shifts over to the student. So this can be very difficult and challenging for students who are unaccustomed to the responsibility, but without teachers, especially in a school setting, in a group setting, being physically present to be able to make sure kids are paying attention, they don't have as much power as they did. It's another reality that we have to confront, is a teacher's not going to be able to come over and take the phone away or say, hey, knock that off. They can't. They're not physically there. So whether we like this reality or not, there's a lot more responsibility on the student now. And, that is concerning. And that, especially for younger age groups, that's definitely concerning. And it's definitely, a worry. But I really believe that all the steps, that we're going through right now are going to help to eliminate, any mishaps or any distractions or lack of engagement. I think all of these, when you put them in place and you focus on them consistently, they're going to help your student maintain engagement and development through their education, which is the #1 priority. So what you do after class affects engagement for the next class, right? It's a cycle. It's cyclical. Preparing for it is going to be huge. but also what you do after. If you don't do the homework, how are you going to engage in the class next time? So what, engaging in the material, I talked about at the beginning of the slide, engaging in the material after the class is done. You have to make sure we're doing that. We have to engage on all fronts. Okay, so we had a couple more questions here that I'm going to look over at. So we have Wendy, time constraints are an issue. To share others, time to share material. What about outdoor time before class? So time constraints are an issue. I'm not sure in what sense you mean, for the student or for the teachers themselves in the physical classroom, Wendy. I'm a little bit confused just by the wording there. They need time to share with others and with the material. I don't get it. So Wendy, feel free to time is short for the students. During the classroom, I guess that is the case. I'm not sure if you're talking about during classroom time, but for me, in my experience, the students have more, okay, so during. I think that goes directly into preparation. We making sure that we're as efficient in our class time as possible. We need to make, and we need to, this is where it takes some experimentation, right? Because this is new to all of us. So let's create, a guideline for what's going to happen in the class. That's what I do for my students, even one-on-one. I say, here's our agenda for this specific classroom. And I play around with what is working and what's not, what makes the time more efficient, and what makes, where we lose time. What can a student be doing on their own? One of the things I've realized is, maybe the time to do things like 5-minute reading to yourself and things like that, we may need to start to step away from things like that because this classroom time is becoming much more valuable now. So I think there's a number of things that we need to do, but we need to, A, measure efficiency. How efficient are we being with our classroom time with our students, and how efficient are they being? How are we measuring that? And how are we adapting it to make sure that we're keeping them efficient and we're making the most of our time? Jonathan asked another question here that I'll look at before I get into the next slide. I think it's hard. Okay, others are handing work late at night. So yeah, this is, we'll get into this, Jonathan, in a little bit more depth later on, but I think that it goes into preparation and, making time for school time. We'll get into that. We'll get into that in later slides. So Wendy, let me know if that answered your question as well. So read the instructions. I'll go through this slide fairly quickly. I just wanted to add one about this because it became like the thing when we first moved to distance learning. It became like my students, every assignment started with that. Read instructions online and turn in and it just became, we were all just hit with this so quickly that, there wasn't a great solution for it right away, but this became such a generic and frequent, I don't want to say mundane, but frequent sort of monotonous introduction to all of students' work all over the country. It was amazing. That's another interesting phenomenon of online tutoring is that, I'm able to work with students that are in New York, California, even Italy and Nigeria as of recently as this week. So, that's interesting. But, all over, people were experiencing the same thing, reading instructions online and turn in, and it's caused students to not really engage with the instructions as much as they should, which has already been an issue with students. And, I'm sure many parents know, did you read the instructions, or are you just looking at numbers 1 through 10 and trying to fill it out and struggling without understanding what you're going to do? So again, this is another piece that's critical to engagement, because if a student doesn't understand what they're doing up front, they're going to be frustrated, they're going to be embarrassed, and they're not going to engage with the material. So this is vital for engagement. And now that we're doing things online, distance learning, parents, I'm encouraging you to really press your your kids to make sure that they know what they're doing before they do it. I want to give you just one example of that. And this is a student that I wish I never had to have. I had a high school student who was a senior who had a project for the end of the year, big research paper that was supposed to be 8 to 12 pages. And they had 7 days to turn it in when they reached out to me. And, that's already a nightmare as was. And I told them, look, if you're looking for a good grade, it's already not going to happen. because, you know, we need to work every single day for at least an hour a day together, and he needs to be working on this for 3 hours a day, you know, minimum. And, you know, we worked through, and we were able to work every day to get to a point where we handed in something with, you know, he handed in something that had a strong enough thesis to carry him to a decent grade. But the whole issue that we ran into was, you know, we had 5 pages of material written, and the student never really understood exactly what their paper should be talking about and how. We spent like the first 2 or 3 days on a thesis alone, so then we ended up having 3 or 4 days to write a whole paper. You know, so again, it's on all levels. Make sure you're reading the instructions. Don't just read it once, read it 3 or 4 times before starting. Make sure you understand it in a nuanced way. Break it down. Create a plan from the instructions. You know, maybe the instructions are long and intimidating. What are the pieces to this assignment? What are the different parts that I need to complete? That makes it a lot less intimidating. You know, where do I start? How am I going to break this into smaller tasks? What is my timeline going to be? You know, so that way it helps you to self-plan naturally. I'm not just going to have, you know, a whole long instructions and I want to get the whole thing done. You know, I have 6 different things that I need to do for this assignment. These 3 are really tough for me. And I'm dreading doing that. Maybe just to get it started, I'll start with the 3 easy tasks. And that, you know, that'll get you going. That will help people. It also helps with confidence level. You know, getting the students started working out on what they're good at, you know, breaking down the process and finding where they thrive and starting with there, just so we can build up some confidence. You know, start the classroom, start the day, start the homework session, whatever it is, with some confidence, because that's vital to engagement. And then, you know, I skipped over this, but I do want to, you know, mention it. Highlight keywords and due dates. That's a part of, you know, how you're going to build out the plan for the assignment, and perhaps for your school year, depending on how detailed you want to be with self-planning. You know, highlight those words, highlight the ones you don't understand, look them up, understand which ones are important so you can know what the teacher's looking for. So growing from responsibility to accountability. This is a tough one. So, you know, what's the difference is what a lot of students will ask. And, oh, skip the slide there. So, you know, a lot of students will not even know what the difference between accountability and responsibility is. And I talked about responsibility earlier. The students have a lot more responsibility, but accountability is the game changer now with this distance learning, because, you know, students were always responsible for homework, right? We were always responsible for, you know, going to class on time, showing up to class, handing in the homework, you know, taking the tests. You have your basic responsibilities, but, you know, physically we're held a little bit more accountable by a number of different things. But now that we're by ourselves at home, and as long as that pattern and that trend continues, the accountability of the results and what the student learns in their actual development is what becomes important. And the onus actually moves to the student, which can be, you know, that's a huge deal, right? You know, it's like I said, you know, when a group classroom is going on, teachers can't do the things that they used to do. It's just a reality of it. You know, they're not able to make sure that a student is doing everything that they can do. Teachers can provide all the resources, materials that they did before, and, you know, push students to engage the same way that they did. But students are going to have to, they're going to be the ones that are going to be, they're going to be the ones who are accountable for it. You know, they get to make that decision. So it's really easy to be passive with virtual learning. You know, it's easy. Now kids are you're able to get away with more. You know, there's no question about it, especially early on. You know, Wendy and I spoke about the face-to-face engagement being so important. You know, push your students to do that. Make sure that they are engaging with you face-to-face, and don't, you know, do everything you can to make sure that they're not allowed to be passive. And that does go back into eliminating distractions, focusing on school time as school time. You have time for other stuff. You know, Wendy, we talked about during session time, but what about the time outside of the session? That's most time, and that's most important, you know, to me, in terms of getting ourselves ready and being accountable for actually doing the work. And we want to know the long and short-term consequences of missed work. Yes, it's easy to be passive. Yes, it's easy to not do the work and you just not, you know, not do it or just get away with the bare minimum. But what are the long and short-term consequences of that going to be? Maybe that's something that we need to talk with our students about. It's something that I've started to speak with them a lot more, and their parents as well, is, okay, what's our plan and what's our long-term, where do we need to be? Because if you're not developed to this level by the time you get to high school, you're going to be in trouble, and the same thing, it's for every single grade, every single age group. You're just building a bigger and bigger hole for you, the more passive you're being and the less you're engaging. On a positive note, since we're talking about so many challenges and so many difficult things, I do think that there's some benefits to distance learning. I think that, and this is from my experience, not just in a crisis, but this is from my experience of the last 3 years from building an online practice. I find that having that on top of your schoolwork, having one-on-one professional help, or just, some kind of live professional help on top of your schoolwork, it improves the skill set and academics, just by that dynamic of responsibility and accountability. It's one of the things that I work on with my students. About 2 or 3 years ago, I was really building the case study. Student in California who was an AP student, and we basically only worked on academic improvement and skill development. Very bright kid, came to me with a set plan already and said, I have a C+ in AP English. It's my only non-B or A grade. It's my only B, or it's my only grade that's below a B-, basically. And how do we get to this level with writing? And that accountability aspect of it, giving him specific things that he had to reach, goals that he had to reach, assignments that he had to complete. That's how we were able to build skill and academic improvement. But everyone is different. So, you're going to need to experiment and play around with the different types of plans and things like that. Number 2, I think it builds a lot of confidence. That's a big part of my sessions when I work with students is, I find it's a huge issue with kids that are behind, kids that are struggling to catch up to their peers. That they lack the confidence to engage, and they lack the confidence of their own opinion and the merit of their own thoughts. So I really try to break down that barrier, and I try to build a lot of confidence with students. And I think that distance learning, it allows kids to do that because, especially in a one-on-one setting, you don't have the judgment of your peers. I'm working with one person in particular right now where they hate reading out loud and they've gotten really bad at it, and they're going to go to high school and they're not quite ready. But what we're doing is, I've been able to, build some confidence because one-on-one, there's no pressure. I'm not grading you. I'm helping you to develop. So that helps to build confidence in a little bit more of a casual way. And it helps them to work towards a higher level of engagement. So motivation, it's 2:44. So I'm going to go through this one fairly quickly because we have touched on it quite a bit. But motivation is really important. Someone asked about it. I feel like motivation is very tied to an individual-based notion of where that individual student is. So yeah, motivation, the groups do affect it, but it's very precise to an individual, to me, especially with students, no matter what age they are. As they get older, I feel like they become more individualized, no matter how they're acting or speaking on it. So I think number 1, we need to understand their skill level in earnest. I've received some students where we don't actually know their skill level, but we have to understand where they are at and where they need to go. That's number 1, so that we don't give them too much work, we don't make them panic, and we don't not challenge them. We don't make them, we don't stagnate development in that way where they're not being challenged enough and they're sort of staying at the same level and they're not improving the way that they need to. We need to know what incentivizes them. That's different for every student as well. Incentivization is a huge part of how we're going to keep them accountable. So understand what incentivizes my student, my child, what incentivizes them. How can I use that to help their educational development? Understand why they're avoiding work. That's something that you need to dig into and you need to ask questions about, and it's not going to be black and white. You might find out over time, but we need to understand why they're avoiding work. Getting ahead of that now is going to be to our advantage. Start picking at that, without getting shut out by the student or your kid. It's very important. And we talked about this one-on-one sessions and what they can help with. I do feel strongly that it's a layer of social development outside of educational development. Of course, educational development is where it all started, and that's why I do it. But that one-on-one setting, I've realized, has a lot of positive impacts on students' confidence level and, you know, what they're, you know, how they feel in engaging and in participating in a classroom setting. So, oops, sorry, student self-planning, and I'll start getting to the Q&A in just a second. Just one more slide and then sort of a thank you and a reminder. Student self-planning is the last thing that I want to talk about. All of these steps that I've talked about, they'll help you to self-plan. Just like in writing, just like in reading comprehension. When you have a plan, you're going to be more successful. Break the plan and break the process. Have a process and break the process down into different pieces. What's the easiest thing to fix? Start with that. If you're struggling knowing where you want to go, what you want to do, you know, there's so many things that we need to fix. Just start with the easiest thing. Helps build confidence, helps you to build your plan as you go. Again, be clear about school time versus other time. I can't emphasize that enough. There's a time for school and there's a time for other things. There is, when there's not an in-person classroom setting, we need to dedicate school time for our kids and our students. We have to do it. It's not optional. And you know, you're gonna find parents and students who do that, they're going to develop at a significantly more efficient and faster rate than students who do not do that. Also, practice accountability. Self-planning helps to do that. Students are going to need to be more accountable now for themselves. Start practicing it now. It's going to put them miles ahead of their peers in the future. Get things done on time, have them participate in class, and continuously be planning and preparing your students. All of it is going to pay off. So, just a little thank you slide and reminder before I get to the Q&A. This is my Take Lessons profile. Feel free to reach out to me there with any other questions that you guys have. And please do use the code GET10 if you decide to book a lesson, because that will give you 10% off. Okay, and you're going to take a quick look at the Q&A right now. 2 more minutes. Okay, there's so many different platforms to do distance learning. Which ones are my favorite? Because I was exposed to at least 4 or 5 different ones. So this is a big security and privacy thing with a lot of schools, especially public schools. I love to use a number of different things. I love to use Zoom. I like to use Microsoft Teams. That's one that I think is the best if you can, one of the best, you know, if you can afford an option that is a little bit more expensive. Google has, what was it? I said Zoom, and then I said, sorry, I lost my train of thought, Jonathan, but it'll come back to me. I use Zoom, I use Skype. Take Lessons, the website that I use, they have their own product that they use. But there's a number of different ones. I would say Zoom, Skype, Microsoft Teams, that's what it was. Zoom, Skype, Microsoft Teams, Google. These are all viable options. It depends on what you want to do and what you need to share. Anything that has screen share capabilities and document share capabilities with video chat, huge plus, especially if there's a chat where you can communicate. Okay, 1 more minute. Let's see. Jonathan asked another question here. I was an ATR, only new students, less than a month. We're taking settings lax. Yeah, Brown suggesting. So I think, Jonathan, I think special ed is a whole nother setup. I think that you can use this. I think you can use my guidelines to create the framework of a structure for special ed, but special ed's going to look much different. So start out with mapping out the plan, start out with what it's going to look like. And then I think you can go from there. So it is 2:50 now. That is all the time that I have today, but guys, this was a really great and engaging session. I really enjoyed, you know, all of the questions and everything. I want to remind you to go to my profile, and I will respond as quickly as I can whenever I see anyone reaching out. But again, thank you guys so much for today. I hope to see you on my profile soon. Take care.